And you're locked into another episode of the Emilio Podcast. My name is Josh, and we are back once again this week, making that intersection between faith and animation and delivering those redemptive analogies you've come to know and love. If you haven't already, make sure to like this video, also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and ring the bell for notifications so that you are notified each and every time that we upload a new video. And this week is a themed week, actually. If you've been keeping up with our social media and also our website, it is Hobbit themed. Now, me and myself, I wasn't always very much into like Lord of the Rings and Hobbit-y things, but through meeting my lovely wife, Rebecca, she has shown me the error of my ways and has made me, I guess I would say a bit of a fan of Tolkien and all that.
Well, I certainly hope that you at least understand more of the world and why people would like it so much.
Yeah, I do. I mean, there's fanciful creatures and elves and trolls, hobbits, dwarves, wizards, and I'm all for that, fantasy thing. I guess I was forced to watch it the first few times, and I don't like to be forced to do things. I want to be given the option. So when you recommended, hey, let's watch all the Lord of the Rings movies, and would you be interested? So you asked, and I therefore I caved to your ways.
Well, I also promised you a marathon for Back to the Future, so that was the give and take there. We do marathon for Lord of the Rings, marathon for Back to the Future.
Absolutely. And it was fun. We did cookbook recipes for the Back to the Future. We did cookbook recipes for the Lord of the Rings. And it was really, really fun. So we decided with it being Hobbit Day, that's actually taking place on September 22nd. So just a couple days after this video releases. And that is the birthday of Frodo and Bilbo Baggins, correct?
That is correct.
So we wanted to kind of make all this, everything that we did, the Hobbit-y, I guess you would say. Now, Rebecca is more well-versed in Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, all that lore than I am. She keeps up with it. And she also did a blog post for the website regarding the Rings of Power. So go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. We'll link that down in the description as well. So before we get on to talking about the movie for today's episode, which I kind of already get an idea of what it's going to be about already, we actually saw a play, I think it was a couple nights ago, and it was really, really well done for community theater. It's just such great talent. And we hadn't been to a musical, or nonetheless a play, gosh, in like months, right, Rebecca?
It's been a long time, yeah. Last time we went to some sort of cultured function, if you will, was when what had to do with Julie and the Nashville Symphony and all of that.
And that's all fun and good. Nashville Symphony, opera, always fun. But I want something that's not like in the classical range.
Well, musical theater is very different than
right.
classical. So it was really nice to be able to go out and watch the play. Yeah,
so we saw Next to Normal, and I had seen the play when it was in the Nashville area like several years ago. And then it was come to Nashville via a street theater company, I believe is the name. And I was like, Rebecca, we have to see this. You're going to love it. So, Rebecca, give us just a brief description of what it's about and, your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so I went in completely blind. The only thing Josh said was that it was about mental health issues. And I was like, okay, great. Love musicals, love talking about mental health issues. Like, all of that. And so kind of went in blind and was very moved by the story. It was really, really great performance. But Next to Normal, the play in general, is about really a mom who, this woman, her name is Diane, and she has a pretty severe mental health disorder. And as you watch the play, you see things unfold of how her family is dealing with this mental health disorder. And I won't say what it is because it will take away from the play itself. But if you know, you know what's going on. I was pretty shocked, honestly, by some of the revelations. But it was really, really good. It brought a lot of awareness to mental health or just, you know, like things. I mean, the crazy thing to me was how they portrayed treatment. Like, I don't, I could be wrong. I'm not up on some of these treatments, but the one that was talked about mostly was, what was it, Josh? ELC, ETC.
It was ETC.
Yeah. So basically, it's an electroshock therapy is what it is, and I have no idea if that is still used today. I have not done research on that, but it seems like a pretty extreme form of treatment for these mental health this mental health disorder that this person has. I don't know that I would have immediately gone there. It deals a lot with psychopharmacology. There's even a song about psychopharmacologists. But who Diane goes to see is primarily a psychiatrist who is a medical doctor first and foremost. And I absolutely believe that it's important to have medical doctors that specialize in mental health disorders and can get prescribed the medication that's needed. I don't know how much training they have though with more of the like talk therapy side, because their main focus is going to be in prescribing medication. So it was really interesting to see that Diane was really only going, it seemed like, to a psychiatrist, which is not a full picture of mental health care. And I could do a whole podcast probably just on these topics. But at the very, very end, after doing this extreme, what I would think is a pretty extreme form of treatment, all of a sudden the doctor is like, well, what about EMDR? And she named a couple things. And I was like, yeah, why did we not try that? I don't understand why that would not have been the first form of treatment that we would try instead of shock therapy. Like, why? Like, let's do that first before shoving someone with a bunch of pills. It's just like, let's try other things. How about that? There absolutely is a time and a place for medications. I 100% believe that. I also think that it's important to look at all of our options of forms of treatment and see where we can go from there. So there are wonderful treatments now, like EMDR. An offshoot of that would be brain spotting, and neurofeedback is also a fantastic option, particularly for Diane, who she was dealing with a lot of like her brain, like brain waves and things were not doing quite right, and not, yeah, anyway, whatever, her brain waves weren't great. And so like neurofeedback would be fantastic for that, like to help, you know, instead of having these huge spikes, I think it's in her like delta waves or beta waves, one of those, whatever the little black line is on the when you look at brain waves. If that's spiking, that means that there's like trauma or something it has happened. And through neurofeedback, you can actually help to level out all of the little brain waves. and it doesn't hurt. There is no pain. It's a very pleasant experience. I've actually done it. So there was no need really for this electro shock therapy. Because there were some pretty extreme results, like memory loss and a whole bunch of other things. So I have no idea if the person who wrote this play, if they knew anything about mental health disorders, or if seems like they had some sort of connection with mental health disorders. Either their family member was going through something like that, or they themselves were something. I don't know, but it was really good. It was really good. And the play that we saw was performed by an all-black cast, which was really interesting. That's not, Josh was telling me, that's not traditionally how they cast the characters in the play.
Well, yeah, because generally it was performed by an all-white cast. That's then, at least in the renditions that I witnessed or saw in person, online, thought it was great. I believe they called it a biopic casting or rendition of the play, which is great because it. Rebecca, you said something about there being a stigma within the African American community about mental health. So it was great to see a all-black cast doing this play, and such great talent, which is something, unfortunately, that you don't always see, especially in musicals. I don't think I've ever seen, professionally done, all black musical, and even in like TV and movies, it's very limited.
Yeah, I'm sure they exist, those different companies, but yeah, it was excellent. From what I've heard from people who are African Americans, they talk about in the community, it's like there's a lot of mistrust with mental health providers in general. I don't know the full history of that, but it sounds like there's a lot more that goes into it, and a really big stigma. I mean, heck, there's a really big stigma even with other cultures, just like in general, mental health has a pretty big stigma. Thankfully, in the past, 5 or so years, that's really gone down, which is fantastic. There's a lot more awareness being brought to the surface, which is really, really good. So that makes me happy.
Absolutely. And wonderful music. Just, again, want to recognize and give a shout out to that talent once again. Amazing.
Yeah, and that was the theaters.
Yeah, that was a Street Theater Company. So they are on Instagram and online. So go check them out. And if you're in the Nashville area, I think they're doing a few plays for the rest of this year. So I think the next one is a VHS Christmas Carol, which I've heard is very funny. Well, we spent a little bit more time on musicals and mental health than I thought we would, but
sorry, my fault.
And it's all right. We you get a little bit more on the video version of the podcast. So as we have mentioned already, it is Hobbit themed week, so we're going to continue along that trail in today's episode, and we'll be talking about the animated Hobbit movie. Now, this came out in 1977. A lot of other themed movies were being made around this time as well. When I say Rankin and Bass, many of you may recognize that because of all the Christmas movies. Santa Claus is Coming to Town, Rudolph, all that stuff. And so when I saw Rankin and Bass here, I was a little bit surprised. But as we watched the movie, throughout, it made total sense that they would make this movie. One thing that was in like the opening credits is this movie said it was based on the original Hobbit by Tolkien. And like I said, there's more than one? Like, what's the original?
Yeah, I don't know if there were like multiple versions that were published or what. I don't know. I was under the impression there was only one, but I don't know if there are some Lord of the Rings aficionados, if they know if there were multiple renditions of the story.
Yeah, because we know we have the Hobbit. So, in chronological order, we have Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Lord of the Rings Two Towers, Lord of the Rings Return of the King, and is there another one?
You missed Fellowship of the
Oh,
Ring.
Fellowship of the Rings, yeah.
Yeah, so it's Hobbit, Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and then Return of the King. And those last three are the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Okay.
And there's like a lot more in the world of Middle Earth. And and all of that I think Tolkien didn't. I think Tolkien only published The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, but he was working on other stories too. And then his son, Christopher, I believe is his name, carried on his father's legacy and ended up writing and publishing several other stories within the world that give like more background to the story. And the Rings of Power, which our blog post was about, actually a lot of that came from the history in the appendix, I think, of the Lord of the Rings books, which gave a lot of like history and background. And if I'm honest, I didn't finish that part. I was like, I really don't care about the history and the world building. I know Tolkien did. He was a history fiend. He loved history, loved languages specifically, which is why he includes so many songs in his books and in the Hobbit movie even as well. And so I love history as much as the next person, but maybe not so much fictional history.
Yeah, I love history as well. I don't know that I would want to read all about the Hobbit history and the history of the Lord of the Rings. So I'm kind of with you on that one. But Rebecca, since you know this movie better than I do, and as far as the whole story, go ahead and give us a brief description of what the Hobbit, the animated movie, is about.
Yeah, so The Hobbit, the animated movie, really follows very closely the book of The Hobbit. And it's a story about Bilbo Baggins, who lives in Bag End in the Shire. And of course, if you know anything about Lord of the Rings, you probably have heard of Bilbo. But Bilbo is young in this particular story. And Gandalf comes to him and says, "Hey, I have this grand adventure for you to go on." Bilbo resists, of course, because he's like, "I kind of like my comfortable home. Thank you very much. Don't really want to go on an adventure. Don't want to do that." And eventually he becomes persuaded. And so he goes with these 13 dwarves to go capture their homeland. I believe it's 13. They're 12 or 13. I don't remember. But he goes off with these dwarves to recapture their homeland from the dragon Smaug. And of course, they have lots of little mini adventures along the way. They meet trolls, they meet Elrond. They go into the wood elves' domain of all of that. And eventually, they make it to the Lonely Mountain, which is where Smaug is, and reclaim the Lonely Mountain for the home of the dwarves.
First time seeing this, bought it like a couple weeks, actually about a month ago, just in preparation for this week. I will say the first thing I noticed was the whole like character design. There are some scary looking characters in this movie.
There are some scary characters. Not necessarily how the book portrays them. From what I remember, it's been a bit. It's been a couple years since I've read for the first time The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. But yeah, the Hobbits, yeah, I could see that Hobbits would look like that. He was very well dressed, squatty little dude with hair on the tops of his feet. Yeah, he makes sense. Gandalf made sense. He was a much more hairy individual than I thought he would be. The dwarves were quite wrinkly, and some of them had very large foreheads, which I found strange. But they're dwarves, they're fantastical characters, so it's fine. The only thing I didn't buy into was the wood elves. The wood elves looked very different than we've always seen elves portrayed. And in the book, I'm pretty sure they were described as this sort of like beautiful, ethereal creature.
Well, they weren't in this movie.
They were not.
None of those elves would have been on the cover of Sports Illustrated. I'll tell you that much.
No, they would not.
Well, kind of like one of the main themes I wanted to talk about was Providence and kind of trusting in the unexpected and the unknown, which is a big theme in this movie. We get it right from the get-go with Gandalf coming to visit Bilbo Baggins and say, "Would you like an adventure?" And he's like, "No, I'm fine." It's like, "You do not want an adventure?"
He was pretty insistent. A little creepy, honestly. I was
what?
All right, Gandalf.
Enough. I am Gandalf. And Gandalf means me.
He was intense. The whole movie was intense, but man, it starts off strong. He says some things that you're like, "Oh, I would not have said that."
But they pack a lot into like the first 5 minutes. So we get like the whole plan of what Bilbo has to do. We're introduced to the dwarves that are going to accompany him. The whole like map and him getting the sword or the dagger that's called the stinger.
It's just called Sting.
Oh, Sting. Sorry. So a lot that's packed into an hour and 17 minutes.
Some of it goes really, really fast, and some of it goes kind of drags.
Really slow. Yeah, kind of drags. I think they spent more time on Gollum than like they did on any other part, because that Gollum piece like lasted like longer than I wanted it to.
Well, it didn't make sense with how they spent so much time with Gollum, but then like no time at all on the events leading up to that it was so strange to see that scene last so long. And it's because it's iconic,
right?
You know, I mean, it is iconic scene where Bilbo meets Gollum, and Gollum is a fascinating creature.
He looks very different. He looks like kind of like a lizard boy, if you will, in that movie.
It's almost like a fish.
Yeah,
he looks kind of like a fish. Very strange. But he's not. He's actually a hobbit, a very old, corrupted, wrinkly hobbit. But yeah, it's weird to think about that.
So I want to talk about a little bit about Providence while we discuss this movie. Now, I'm not talking Providence as far as, Providence, Rhode Island. That's different. Providence in the way of its definition as a noun, and that means divine guidance. And we see this in the character of Gandalf when he's leading the dwarves, and he's basically come to that last minute rescue most of the time to Bilbo and the dwarves, and also leading the charge in a way before he hands off the reins to Bilbo. And now Bilbo is very reluctant to go on this journey because it's unknown to him. It's unexpected. It's outside of his comfort zone. This makes me think a lot about the story of Abraham when he's asked to kind of like leave his home in faith. And we see this in Genesis 2:1.
12:1.
Genesis 12:1. So in Genesis 12:1, it reads, "Now the Lord said to Abraham, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you." And Rebecca, can you give us a little bit more context of that story?
God was basically telling him he was going to take him to the promised land. It is really where it was. And it's not called that in the Bible, but if I remember right, it is. He ends up settling in the land of Canaan, I think. And this is where God was wanting to take him just from one place and like put him very specifically in another place so that the rest of history could unfold with the Israelite people.
And we don't get to see like that promised land until, much later?
Much later. Many generations later.
So again, it's trusting in that plan when you may not be in the end goal of it. It may be days, weeks, years before you see the big picture, which we'll get to a little bit later on in our discussion. But this is exactly what Bilbo is not understanding at the start. He just thinks, oh, well, this old decrepit wizard wants to take me from my home and my comfortable living. Kind of like we talked to God a little bit. It's like, oh, he's making me do things again. I don't want to do this. Why are you making me do this? Mm-hmm. And God's saying this, like, listen, just trust. You don't understand. Just trust.
Yeah, that reminds me of that verse that's in Proverbs 3:5-6, where it's talking about trusting the Lord. It says specifically, trust the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. So like, we don't know. We don't know what we don't know, That's like a terrible way to say that. But our understanding is so limited compared to God's. And so it's really important for us to not lean on our own understanding, but trust the Lord in what he has for us and take a leap of faith and go on an unexpected journey.
And to kind of also do the other part of that verse 6, and in all your ways acknowledge him, being God, and he will make your path straight. So not only are you stepping in that, in that path, just taking that leap of faith, you're also acknowledging, hey, taking this step of faith, that I believe in God, trusting in what he's doing, and if I do that, he's going to guide me.
And along the way, there'll be different trials and tribulations and really challenges.
Yeah, it's not going to all be sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah.
So you can mark that off the list.
Yeah, and we see that pretty clearly with the story of Bilbo and the dwarves. They meet the trolls and they meet Gollum and Smaug and all of these different challenges that they need to overcome. And with the help of Gandalf in many of the situations, it turns out okay. I did find it interesting though that Gandalf was like leaving and coming back and leaving and coming back. And he would only show up at key moments. And Bilbo and the dwarves felt quite alone from Gandalf. Like he was there some of the times, but not other times.
Well, I mean, we could say that, about God, honestly. Like he shows up sometimes. It's like, well, why isn't he here now?
Yeah, but he's always working for our good.
Right.
And that's what we don't see when Gandalf leaves. He has other business he needs to take care of, and he's working towards the good of the dwarves and of Bilbo in things that they can't see in that moment.
Now, remind me, can Gandalf travel through time? Like, is he like a soothsayer, or can he kind of jump to certain points within the future? Or
well, that's an interesting question. Kind of. For the purposes of this question, though, no, not like you're thinking. It's not like you're thinking. He's an interesting being because, yes, while he's a wizard, he's I think if I remember from Lord of the Rings lore and history, Gandalf is actually an Ishtar, I think is the name of the people group.
Mm-hmm.
I may be saying that wrong. But they're from Valinor, which is where the elves originate from.
Okay.
Is Valinor. And so I'm pretty sure he's from there. He's had quite an interesting progression as a wizard. He was once Gandalf the Brown, and then Gandalf the Gray, who we see him most as.
That doesn't sound too appealing. The Gandalf the Brown.
The color brown.
Yeah.
Well, I think he was. If I remember right, the colors denote station in wizardry.
All right.
Brown is like lower level, lower tier. Not that lower tier is any less powerful, but yeah, there's. Well, I could go off on a tangent, but so yeah, Gandalf the Grey is who we see him as mostly in Lord of the Rings, particularly Fellowship and like most of the Twin Towers. And then talking about time travel, it's very confusing when Gandalf fights the Balrog, he like travels through time or something while he's fighting the Balrog, and I don't even know how it works. It's confusing, but he comes out in the end. He's defeated the Balrog, and he has all of a sudden become Gandalf the White, and so he's more powerful and everything. He like goes through a transformation, a rebirth or resurrection, if you will. So Gandalf is interesting. He very much represents that like wise person. I think it'd be right to say that he in a way represents God, like we were talking about. He's very much that way. So what's interesting about Tolkien is that he really is the father of fantasy. That's what a lot of people call him. Tolkien was, of course, friends with C.S. Lewis, who was also writing fantasy at the time, just a different kind of fantasy story. And yeah, a lot of it, I lost my train of thought, but he's known as the father of fantasy.
Yeah, and Tolkien is just like such a genius. The way he did his world building, inventing a whole new language within that world.
It's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. But to sum it up, Gandalf cannot travel through time. He's not Merlin, or he goes to Bermuda in the 21st century.
No, he is not.
And believe me, you can have it. One big modern mess. Alakazam!
Oh, gosh. The journey that Bilbo and the dwarves go on, as I mentioned, there are some, fast paced, and then there are some lulls. When they were locked up, were those by the elves, or were those another tribe?
In the cells, you mean?
Yes.
Yes, that was the elves. That was the wood elves.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. In Merwood. Yeah. Oh. They thought that what did they think? The elves thought that the dwarves were coming to hurt them or steal their goods or something like that. I forget exactly.
Steal their wine, because they love their wine, apparently.
They do love their wine. Yes. Let this be a warning. Do not love your wine too much, or little dwarves will come and steal your barrels.
Trying to relate everything that happened. I mean, there's a lot that's happened there. So the movie's kind of weird. There's a lot that happens, and then there's like nothing that happens, kind of.
I get what you mean. Honestly, the pacing is so much better. I know I sound like a typical book reader, but the book is so much better. Honestly, both of the visual representations of The Hobbit were not fantastic. In my personal opinion, I much prefer the books. I didn't, while this was fun and interesting little animated movie, it was just okay. It was okay. I was entertained. It was fine. The Peter Jackson films, the 3-part films, where the animated movie was too short. Those were too long. So just read the book. That would be my suggestion personally. And I know I'm kind of like jumping ahead to what are our final thoughts.
Like, I mean, this is a bit of a shorter one just because number one is a shorter movie. Number two, not a lot that happens. But they get to Smaug. Smaug is like the main objective is to get to Smaug, take back the mountain from Smaug. And this is done through with big help from the men on Lake.
It's Lake Town. I forget the name of the lake, but it's Lake
so
Town.
From Lake Town. So the men, the humans, and also the wood elves.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they come to attack the dwarves.
Yeah.
After the mountain has been procured.
Right.
But the men of the town, they end up shooting Smaug and defeating him.
Right.
By no small part because of Bilbo. Bilbo was the one who saw that the dragon had lost a scale, and that was from the first war when Smaug came down and was attacking the lake town. There was, I think it was the leader of Lake Town, his great grandfather, some sort person, was the one who struck down that one scale, which paved the way for future generations to be able to actually kill Smaug, which I think is really interesting. It's a very like generational story because, and I think Tolkien did that on purpose because it's like, what kind of a future are you building for your children and for future generations? I think that is a really interesting question, particularly from someone who was very interested in history. So it's like the continuation of history. There's a lot to go on there, but they end up defeating Smaug, which is great. And then the armies come against the dwarves because the dwarves are being greedy, greedy.
It's like, we got all this treasure. It's all ours.
Yeah, which of course did not serve them well at all. Yep.
No. Yeah, I didn't like the dwarves for that reason alone. I mean, because Bilbo has even said this, like they're even ungrateful for Bilbo. Like, well, I mean, I've saved you a couple times here and there, and now you want me to go in and get Smaug and potentially get killed.
Yeah, the animated movie didn't do a great job really of building up the relationship between the dwarves and Bilbo. It was much more nuanced than that. Like, while they were greedy, they did care about Bilbo quite a bit. They became really good friends, and I think one or two of the dwarves even show up in The Lord of the Rings at the end of the Return of the King. So Frodo knows the stories of these dwarves.
You said Frodo or Gandalf?
Frodo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Bilbo told stories about the dwarves and what good friends they became towards the end. I talked about all the grand adventures that they had, which is the whole purpose of the story, is going out on a limb and trying a new adventure, doing the unexpected, and really trusting in the bigger picture.
Absolutely. And we talked about this just a few moments ago, where we don't see the bigger picture. When we're looking in our finite knowledge and finite memories, we're looking like this much of the big picture. and God sees the whole, imagine like, parade. So we are looking at it as spectators, and we see it coming, from, left to right, whereas God is up above, and he sees the whole parade, all the twists and turns of what may and may not happen.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
I actually stole that from the Danny Phantom.
Did you really?
It's the episode with Clockwork.
That is funny.
But I mean, it applies. It applies here.
It does. You are correct. Man, love Danny Phantom. Great show.
Yeah, we need to do something on that. Maybe we'll do that. Maybe one episode in October.
Yeah, that'd be great. Actually.
Gosh. Yeah. So again, bit of a shorter episode for this week. Because it's a shorter movie, but we want to, reemphasize the point of if God is asking you to do something, even though you may be leery of it, wary of it, just like Bilbo was when Gandalf was proposing a new journey and a new adventure to him, kind of like step out in that faith. You won't know what's going to happen. You don't see the big picture, but go on that journey, embrace those challenges, and you'll be in the quote unquote your own promised land, at the end of it. And just like at the end of the movie where Phyllis says, oh, well, it's all over, isn't it? It's like, no, it's just the beginning.
Oh, yes. And how right Gandalf was. So much to come with the story.
But it was a great movie. Rebecca, do you have any final thoughts?
I mean, I said a lot of mine already, but I guess the only thing I wanted to say, particularly about this animated movie, is they went all in with that theme song.
Oh my gosh. It was like every 5 minutes.
Every 5 minutes.
And it wasn't like, it would be like little snippets. So it wasn't the whole thing. But you just hear it like,
just to remind you.
Just to remind, yeah. I'm like, okay, I understand Rankin and Dash, they use songs, but even in their Christmas movies, it's not that bad.
Well, and maybe you made a good point, Josh, when we were watching it. You were like, it looks pretty clearly like this was on TV and was meant to be on TV.
Yeah, like a TV movie, yeah.
Yeah. Because it like faded out, faded back in. It was like pretty regular intervals. So I bet if we went back through that lens, I bet they probably played that little clip of a song like once during the little clip. And so, I mean, if you've got like 5 or 6 commercial breaks, that's quite a bit that you've got that song in there. It was a good little song. And it was always a motif of reminding Bilbo about the importance of adventure and how exciting adventure will be. The only other thing besides that song is that there's a point in the movie and in the books as well where Gandalf sees that Bilbo is struggling with keeping a positive attitude. He's like, it's raining, it's cold. This is terrible. Everything is terrible. I want to go home. And Gandalf comes to him and says, whenever you start to feel this way, think of lovely things. And so Bilbo starts thinking about eggs and bacon for breakfast and his lovely fireplace and sitting in front of it with a good book and having a cup of tea and all of those wonderful, lovely things. And he's able to hold on more. That really reminds me of the verse in Philippians 4:8, which says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And Gandalf is really teaching Bilbo to see the positive things. There's something really interesting that happens when you think about something often, you are creating like patterns and grooves in your brain, highways, if you will, that make it much easier when you start on a thought process channel, if you will, to just continue down that path of thinking. And so by Bilbo then starting to think about these lovely, pure, wonderful things, he is creating a new channel for gratitude and for positive thinking instead of negative thinking or stinking thinking, as it is said a lot of times. And that's really important.
Absolutely would agree. Yeah, keep your thoughts on, just as it says in Philippians, on things that are lovely, things that are pure. The more you think about positive things along your journey, the more you're going to be able to weather that journey.
And the more you'll be able to recognize more positive things in your life. And I don't think that's like ignoring the negative things that are in your life. It's more about not ruminating on the negative things in your life.
Right. Kind of be like Bilbo. Think of cakes and pies and
there you go.
And twilight in your garden. Oh, man. Well, we hope you have all enjoyed this episode. We've given you, maybe some food for thought regarding Providence with God, and maybe even check out the animated version of The Hobbit, or check out the live action version. Or, oh heck, go ahead and read the book if you want to. I'm not stopping you. I'm not your dad.
That would be my suggestion. As you heard earlier, I would definitely suggest reading the books. And I would definitely suggest listening to the audiobooks of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. The ones with Andy Sykes, I believe, is the narrator's name. He is fantastic at narrating the stories, and he sings the little songs, and it is such a fun ride. Definitely listen to the audiobooks with Andy Sykes, because there's different versions, and his version came out just a couple of years ago, so it's pretty new.
Well, you have some recommendations. And before we end today's video, we actually did a cooking video courtesy of Rebecca, where she made some Hobbit meals. I believe it was, actually, I don't want to tell you. I want you all to go check out that video. We'll have that link down to it in the description. So it's fun to do that, and you get to see us, you get to see Rebecca at least out from behind the desk and in a new setting. So go check that out, and leave a comment and tell us if you would like more of those types of videos, because we had fun. I had fun filming it. Rebecca had fun cooking all the stuff.
Yep.
So it was a great time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, until next time, keep those halos shiny and stay holy, my friends.